Welcome to this special edition of Hannity Beyond the Midterms. Hello, I'm Mike Huckabee, in tonight for Sean. Stick around because later in the show, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. I kind of know her a little bit. She happens to be my daughter, and she's going to be here for an exclusive interview on all the big issues that the White House is facing. But first, this is a Fox News alert. We are 10 days removed from the midterms, but election chaos rages on in Southern California. Joining us now with the very latest from Palm Beach County in Florida is Phil Keating. Phil, give us an update.
Governor, the sometimes struggling and sometimes notorious Florida elections workers actually made significant and really almost complete progress today in dealing with the remaining outstanding ballots that were still questionable, the hand count as it is called down here. But here in Palm Beach County and most of the state, they are completely done, if not very, very close to it. Inside the warehouse here in Palm Beach County where all the counting has been going on, well, there's no one inside. It's all locked up, all for the night. Now, across the state this morning and afternoon, canvassers went through ballots which had been kicked out by the machines, determining voter intent, if at all possible. In Broward, the vast majority were undervote ballots where the Senate race had been left blank. Democrats are blaming that on ballot design. As for the Senate race itself, the original vote count and recount numbers are pretty much close to the same. Republican Governor Rick Scott leading Democrat Bill Nelson by almost 13,000 votes. And today on Fox, Florida's Attorney General faulted the Nelson campaign for its lawsuits, suggesting Nelson just needs to concede and end it all.
We have to have deadlines, and the way to prevent fraud is to have signature verification, as we do in Florida. Okay. What if we didn't? You could go to the polls and somebody could sign Mickey Mouse, and that would count as a vote. And that, to me, is a joke on the integrity of our system, and that's the way that they would have our system work, and it just doesn't.
Almost no public statements at all from Senator Bill Nelson, his campaign, or his recount attorney, Mark Elias, a longtime Democratic operative. The future here is that Sunday at noon up in Tallahassee at the Secretary of State's office, every county, all 67, must have their updated numbers turned in. The Secretary then will forward that on to the State Canvassing Board, which is planning on a meeting first thing Tuesday morning to certify Florida's still going on 2018 election. Governor.
Phil, thanks a bunch. Stay safe down there in Florida. We're going to have more reaction to the ongoing recount in Florida a little later in the show. But first, let's turn to some major new developments out of the Mueller probe. Could this seemingly endless investigation finally be coming to an end? Here with us for a full report, Doug McElway. Doug?
Governor, good to see you. Further evidence that the Mueller probe is about to be wrapped up is the president's comment today that he has finished answering written questions supplied by the special counsel's office.
I haven't submitted them yet. I just finished them. As you know, I've been a little bit busy. It didn't take very long to do them, and they were my answers. I don't need lawyers to do that. Now, you need lawyers for submittal. You need lawyers to go over some of the answers, but they're not very difficult questions.
The president's comment that he hasn't submitted the answers yet is potentially significant. Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has repeatedly said that the president would not answer any questions from Mueller on possible obstruction of justice. The remarks also come after Mr. Trump's Twitter storm yesterday, in which he tore into Mueller's probe. Quote, "They're screaming and shouting at people, horribly threatening them to come up with the answers they want. They are a disgrace to our nation and don't care how many lives they ruin." And in another tweet, "The only collusion is that of the Democrats with Russia and many others. Why didn't the FBI take the server from the DNC? They still don't have it. Check out how biased Facebook, Google, and Twitter are in favor of the Democrats. That's the real collusion." Speculation is rampant that Mueller may indict two Trump cohorts, Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi, both of whom have stated they think they will be indicted. That, while George Papadopoulos, a former low-level Trump foreign policy advisor, is asking a judge to stay his 2-week sentence until an appeals court rules separately on whether the Mueller probe is unconstitutional. Papadopoulos is to report to prison on November 26. And separately, House Republicans who are about to bid farewell to their majority in all their investigations of Mueller are making a last-ditch effort to connect on a lame duck session Hail Mary. Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte has said he will subpoena former FBI Director Jim Comey for a closed-door deposition on November 29th and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch on December 5th. In the new Congress, look for things to flip, with Democrats ramping up all kinds of investigations of Trump. The incoming House Intel Committee Chairman Adam Schiff wants to examine whether Mr. Trump laundered money for Russia when he was a businessman. Governor, back to you.
Thank you, Doug. Joining us now with more, the author of The Deep State, Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, the author of The Russia Hoax, one of my favorite books, by the way, and that's authored by Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, along with Fox News contributors Tammy Bruce and Sarah Carter. Good to have all of you here. Sarah, let me begin with you. The Mueller investigation, it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. The president says he's got all those answers done, and it was not hard at all.
Well, and the president also made it very clear, and according to sources that I've spoken with, has made it clear for quite a long time, there's nothing there. They can investigate all they want, but there is absolutely no collusion with Russia. I'm willing to talk about this openly, and he has, and now he's answered these questions. And as far as obstruction and any kind of charges of obstruction, we know that's now been pushed aside by Mueller. You can't charge the president with obstructing justice for firing Comey, one, because Rod Rosenstein himself authored the memo to have him fired, and two, under Article 2 of the Constitution, the president can fire anybody he wants. So at that point in time, I think this is what we're looking at, is Mueller's going to wrap up this probe. We're going to see this wrap up. We're going to see some people possibly come under indictment, maybe Jerome Corsi, maybe Roger Stone, and then we can all move on. And we're probably going to move on to the Democrats now, spending the next 2 years investigating more investigations that will lead to nowhere. So.
Greg, you have talked extensively about, you call it the Russia hoax. Whitaker now seems to be the new whipping boy because somehow the fact that he is in charge of the investigation means that it's suspect. Where does that go?
Oh, it probably goes nowhere. Look, the Office of Legal Counsel issued a 20-page opinion. They're very independent. They said he is perfectly entitled to have been appointed to the position under the recusal regulations. Commenting about a case is not grounds for recusal. I think this continues. I mean, Whitaker is not going to interfere with Mueller. Trump's not going to fire Mueller, especially now since it appears to be reaching the very end. There's no reason to believe there was ever any evidence of collusion. And how do we know that? Because the top FBI lawyer, Lisa Page, in her deposition, confessed the entire time the FBI had the case, they never found any evidence of collusion. And that's significant because you have to have evidence in order to of a crime in order to appoint a special counsel. So that means the appointment of Robert Mueller was illegitimate. They never had any evidence.
Well, one of the things, though, that this brings up, you've got Senator Jeff Flake. He says that he's not going to even allow judicial nominations to get to the floor and go through unless they let him have his little bill that would require a protection of the Mueller probe. There's no indication that anybody's pulling the plug on it. So, Congressman, let me ask you to weigh in on that. Why do we need to pass a bill to protect something that doesn't need to be protected by all indications?
No, we don't. Fundamentally, we don't. First of all, I think what they're proposing is highly unconstitutional. You cannot tie the hands of a president who is empowered by the Constitution. You can't say, Mr. President, you can't fire this particular person. So, A, it's unconstitutional. B, there's no evidence that Donald Trump is actually going to fire this person or dismiss this person. He's been open. He's been transparent. He's been answering their questions. He's about to submit those questions that he got. And I see no need for it. So to hold up judicial appointments for something that's not going to happen anyway, unconstitutional and not necessary.
And Tammy, if nothing is found by Mueller, How in the world does Congress go anywhere with this? What is it they're going to investigate? If Mueller comes up in a dry hole, no matter how deep he's drilled, what do they investigate and why?
Well, look, I mean, this entire investigation from the start was a fraud. All right. It developed out of their own minds, perhaps from their own actions, of course. You always have one of the leftist tactics is to accuse your opposition of what it is you're doing. So I can imagine that they'll come up with something. And of course, it'll be another fraud. All of this is posturing. Everything we've been discussing, including the Jeff Flake action, is really so that they can say, well, you know, he was never fired because we stopped Trump. All of these things are about emotions. It's a fixation on the president. And it's also to give the impression that the Democrats are doing something, because otherwise they might have to try to govern and come up with some ideas that would actually be good for the country and move us forward. But they can't do it. So this is, I think, what is important here is also the fact that the president has even had to write answers to questions that generated, as Greg noted, from an investigation that was illegitimate from the start, that was meant to be exclusively political. And, you know, that report, Governor, will go to Congress, to the House, which then they will say, or at least try to say, that this is the basis for impeachment, because they'll read into it whatever they want to. This is where the president's communication team is key. I'm sad that your daughter is going to be leaving the administration at the end of the year. But
I don't know that she is. I'll have to ask her about that.
Well,
She's not told me. So,
the intimation is earlier in this year that she was. I hope that that's incorrect. But the bottom line is, they're going to have a job to do to push back aggressively, which is not usually the Republican skill of standing up for themselves, but going further and, in fact, pushing back on this entire fraud that has been perpetrated on the American people to the tune of millions of dollars and to the distraction of a man who's trying to save this country.
I want to go back to Congressman Chaffetz, because one of the reports is that we've had indication that Adam Schiff, one of your former colleagues in the Congress, has briefed some of the high-dollar donors in the Democrat Party about the investigations. Is that ethical? Is it appropriate? And if so, what would he have told them?
No, it's not. Look, you can do fundraisers, you can go and talk to interest groups, but if you're billed as, I'm going to provide you information that nobody else is going to be able to provide you because I'm the incoming chairman of the Intelligence Committee, that is really highly suspicious, and I think there needs to be more questions. You know, one of the fundamental things that's different here, Governor, is that the Democrats have signaled 86 different investigations. But they don't have the evidence first. They're presupposing the outcome. They're telling you the conclusion. So he's going to go meet with this group telling you exactly what you're going to do instead of following the evidence. That's
we have a couple of people here on the panel that I want to get back to, both Sarah and Greg. Sarah, let me come back to you, because this investigation, as you and Greg have both pointed out, has essentially been a fire without fuel. How long must Americans tolerate this, and do you see this ending before the end of the year?
I think Americans are extraordinarily frustrated. I think they're angry about this. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I get every day in emails. But I got to tell you this, where there was fuel, it exposed what happened with the FBI and with the DOJ. Deep malfeasance within the FBI and DOJ, which needs to be investigated. And let's not forget that Inspector General Michael Horowitz is still working on his report. It should be issued sometime next year. And it's focusing solely on how the FBI handled this Russia investigation. And every day, Governor Huckabee, we have more and more information about malfeasance. And if Senator Lindsey Graham gets the chairmanship, he promises that he'll continue these investigations. But I think it's going to go much further than this. I think we're going to see some indictments. I think that things are going to come to the surface within the DOJ. We still don't know what John Huber's been investigating. I don't think it's going to end here. I think it's going to end for the president and the fact that he's going to be exonerated. But I think after that, it's not going to end for Hillary Clinton and the rest of them at the FBI.
All right, Greg, we've got less than a minute, but the takeaway from your book that I remember is that there was collusion, but it wasn't with President Trump. It was with Hillary Clinton and their organization.
It's amazingly ironic. Hillary Clinton paid for Russian information that was then fed to the FBI to damage her political opponent. And that was the pretext for the Trump-Russia investigation, and they took it a step further. They used that phony dossier they knew was fabricated from an unreliable, lying source, and they deceived the FISA court judges, concealing evidence and essentially perpetrating a fraud on the court. That needs to be investigated.
Well, hopefully it will be, and I want to say thanks to all of you for being here and sharing perspectives. Coming up on this special edition of Hannity, we're going to have the very latest from the crisis at our southern border. William Lajeunesse is going to join us from the border at Tijuana, so stay with us. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity Beyond the Midterms. Joining me from Tijuana with the latest on the status of the migrant caravan right on our southern border, Fox News correspondent William Lajeunesse. William?
Well, as long as the risk outweighs the reward, Governor, the administration believes this caravan will be followed by many more. That's why they are drawing a line in the sand here in Tijuana. Now, 2,000 people slept in the shelter behind me. More are expected here tomorrow, potentially up to 5,000 people from Caravan A. More caravans are already expected behind that. Now, what are the options? Well, people could go home. I haven't heard anyone say that. They can stay in here in Mexico, raise money, and hire a coyote. Several said they would do that. They could ask for asylum here in Mexico. That's been offered. They could cross illegally. Several have told me they're going to do that. Or they could claim asylum in the United States. Problem is, you can't do it anymore between the borders, right? So right now, the existing line is 1,040 people, we're told. Today, the United States took 30 asylum claims to be heard by an asylum officer. And basically the message to these people is, hey, get in line, take a number. It could take 5 weeks or several months.
I want to just get my number. If they let me give me to me, I wait. I don't know how long I'm away for.
So for many people, the reality is setting in. This could be a long haul. Now, when they left Honduras, the administration policy was catch and release. That changed when they reached Mexico City. They are also seeing for the first time the fencing, the border security, the horses, the ATVs, the helicopters, the barbed wire on top of the fence. That's formidable, giving some maybe a second thought.
We've been preparing for a couple weeks now. We've surged in resources. Department of Defense has been helping us harden the border. What that really means is using concertina wire, building obstacles, making it harder to cross between the ports of entry.
Because the shelter space here in Tijuana is stressed, they stopped several buses in Mexicali about 60 miles, 80 miles east of where I'm at right now because they can't handle the capacity. I was also told informally that there may be a sit-in along the 28 lanes of traffic that go from Tijuana into the United States. That, of course, would bring traffic and commerce to a standstill. Nothing is official here. That's just something I heard from one of the guys. They're waiting till the rest of the caravan arrives to determine what to do next. Back to you, Governor.
William Lajeunesse, thank you very much. Democratic California Senator Kamala Harris, considered the top contender for the 2020 Democratic nomination for president, made an utterly reckless statement yesterday. She suggested that ICE was seen in a similar way to the Ku Klux Klan. Watch her interaction with Trump's nominee to be ICE next director.
The Klan was what we would call today a domestic terrorist group.
Why? Why would we call them domestic terrorist group?
Because they tried to use fear and force to change political environment.
And what was the motivation for the use of fear and force?
It was based on race and ethnicity.
Right. Are you aware of the perception of many about how the power and the discretion at ICE is being used to enforce the laws? And do you see any parallels?
I do not see any parallels between sworn
I'm talking about perception.
Officers and agents.
I'm talking about perception.
I do not see a parallel.
All about perception. Perception. Not the facts, perception. Well, on this network today, former acting ICE Director Thomas Homan had a few choice words for Senator Harris in response to her appalling comments. Take a look.
For her to vilify the men and women, the 20,000 men and women that strap a gun to their hip every day, leave the security of their homes to enforce the law that Congress enacted. She's a member of Congress. If she don't like what ICE does, change the law. Or, you know what, strap a gun on your hip, put a Kevlar vest on, and go arrest somebody that doesn't want to be arrested. That's a significant criminal alien that you let out of your sanctuary jail in California that you support those sanctuary policies. Look, the men and women of ICE aren't making this up. They're doing their job. They're protecting the homeland. They're enforcing the laws that Congress enacted. And to vilify them, call them names, it's just ridiculous.
Joining me now with reaction, former Treasury intelligence analyst Morgan Ortagus, campus reform editor-in-chief Lawrence Jones, and from the Center for Immigration Studies, Jessica Vaughn. Lawrence, I'm going to jump in here with you. Are you offended by Senator Harris's comments and her comparing ICE, law enforcement officials, paid to the United States government to enforce a law, comparing them with the KKK?
Yeah, I don't think it's just insulting to me, but many of the people that fought during the civil rights movement, many of the people that fought to get 3 constitutional amendments so black people could get the rights as other Americans, it's offensive. But again, this is the tone that we've been seeing on the college campuses. Just at Seattle University, we just reported at the campus reform, at the Leadership Institute's campus reform, that they are disbanding their relationship with ICE, where students could get internship credit, all because of all the negative rhetoric that's been going on in these college campuses. These are people that are trying to keep us safe. But of course, with the leftists of today, they don't care about any of that. They want to make these political and emotional statements, but there's no historical context to support what they're saying.
Jessica, let me ask you if you think that this is a little dangerous to try to tell people that a law enforcement agency is akin to a racist organization that lynched people and murdered them and denied people, American citizens, their constitutional rights. Is that a dangerous thing to implant in the minds of impressionable college students?
Oh, most definitely it is a dangerous thing because that undermines ICE's ability to do its job. It empowers sanctuary policies that put the public at risk because they result in the release of criminal aliens back to the streets to keep preying on the community. And it makes it difficult for ICE to do their jobs. It almost like gives like a license to challenge them when they're going about doing a job that's very important to Americans and Americans want to see done. Immigration laws are not some outdated, obsolete laws that don't deserve to be enforced anymore. They protect job opportunities for Americans, they keep Americans safe, and they protect taxpayers, and they protect our legal immigration system. So this is very wrong to undermine this important agency and its work and the people who do it.
Morgan, one of the things that we learned from William LaJeunesse was that there is a mass of people assembling up at Tijuana. And some have said, oh, this isn't going to get here for weeks, if not months. Well, they're here. So that was an outright lie for some of the newscasters to say that it had nothing to do with anything of current events. Well, it's here. What should be the response of the president, Homeland Security, and for that matter, American citizens?
So I think that we have to take a comprehensive all-of-government approach to this. And a lot of people are talking about the troops being on the border, but that is just one element of the strategy, of the national security strategy that the president's is trying to pursue. And I should say, Governor, that it's important to note that this is a national security strategy. By Mattis going down just last week to the border, I think that he gave a lot of credibility and relevance to this project. He said publicly that we don't do stunts. So in one bucket, you have our troops at the border, and they are meant there for a deterrence effect, to say, don't come here, don't invade, you have to go into the proper channels. One of the biggest things that I think we're not looking into that we have to is the fact that we have so many failed states in Central America and on our borders, and we have to look at radical new ideas for foreign aid, because the foreign aid that we have sent billions of dollars worth over decades, we haven't really looked at Central America closely pretty much since the Reagan administration. We were worried about communists. So we have to look at what is our money going to there. Is there a new comprehensive way that we could deal with these failed states? Can we take lessons from what our military and civilian services have done in Iraq and Afghanistan? And then you also have the military aspect, of course, of having that deterrence on the border.
And Lawrence, I mean, my heart is touched when I see children and I see desperate people who are, I mean, immersed in the depths of poverty that it's hard for us even to get our arms around. But a lot of the people who are in this caravan are not little children, and they're not mothers. These are young men capable of doing jobs, and they're threatening that they're going to come whether the law lets them or not. How do you separate that? What is the right response?
Well, Governor, and here's the deal. It's not, a lot of us want comprehensive immigration reform, but there has to be a legal process to do that. And with respect to those young men that are on the border, a lot of them have been fighting journalists on the ground. They've been fighting Border Patrol agents. But these are the same men that won't fight for their own country. I mean, I can only put myself in their position as an American. If my country was under siege and there was an oppressive government going on, what would I do? I would fight for my country and fight for my family. For some reason, they can't do that.
And Jessica, I'll bring you back in. Do you think that there is any hope that there will be a bipartisan solution that will be offered up that will pass this divided Congress that we're about to see?
Well, it's not going to be easy, but it has to happen because we cannot continue to have this influx over our southern border. I mean, it is hard to imagine what life is like for some of these people that must have made them decide to come here. But really, the problem is our policy is enticing people to take this long trek, to put themselves in danger, to put their children in danger, to pay criminal smuggling organizations because they think that they're going to be allowed in and that they're going to be able to get away with living here for the next few years. But it's not fair to them. It's not fair to the American communities that have to absorb these new populations. Congress needs to get something done here. It can no longer allow the courts to impose these restrictions on the executive branch on how they handle an influx of families. Congress has got to get it done. There's only so much President Trump can do on his own. And they're just going to have to find a way to get it done.
I've got to get Morgan back in. Morgan, optimistic or pessimistic as to whether Congress will actually do something? You've lived in this town a long time. You've been in the government. You know it well.
Well, luckily, I live in New York City. I'm not sure that's any better. But what I'll say is I think that your friend, Senator Lindsey Graham, has proposed an interesting deal, which I think could maybe get done, which is trading DACA for the border wall and getting the president's wall. I think it'll be very difficult for the president to go into 2020 without having built the wall. He does have some funding for it. So I think that short-term solution.
A federal judge who you appointed has just ruled that you must give CNN reporter Jim Acosta his press pass back. Your reaction to the ruling?
It's fine. I mean, it's not a big deal. What they said, though, is that we have to create rules and regulations for conduct, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing that. We're going to write them up right now. It's not a big deal. And if he misbehaves, we'll throw him out or we'll stop the news conference. Nobody believes in the First Amendment more than I do. And if I think somebody's acting out of sorts, I will leave. I'll say, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you coming, and I'll leave. And those reporters will not be too friendly to whoever it is that's acting up.
Well, that was President Trump during an interview that will air in full on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. CNN reporter Jim Acosta has regained access to the White House, but the administration is expected to address reporter conduct with new regulations. Joining us now is White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, who I used all of my powers of persuasion to get her into the studio tonight. So one of the statements that came out of the White House today was a statement from you that indicated that there were rules being developed and a protocol being developed. When will we expect to see what that looks like?
I think the biggest thing to take away is, and the place that we focused on is exactly what the president said. We support a free press, but freedom of the press doesn't mean freedom to be disruptive, freedom to be rude, freedom to interrupt and impede the ability of the colleagues of that disruptive reporter from actually being able to do their jobs, as well as White House staff from being able to do theirs. We've laid out in a letter to CNN and their team what we think were some of the missteps that their reporter made at the press conference on November 7th in a letter that we sent them tonight, and we expect to see a response from that. Look, the judge, I think, was actually very clear that the White House has the ability to say you can't come in. You don't have freedom of the press doesn't mean freedom to the White House. And he said there has to be due process. And so that's what we're doing. And we'll see what happens from there.
I mean, the judge's ruling was not a First Amendment ruling. It was a Fifth Amendment ruling.
Exactly.
He never said that CNN had been denied their First Amendment rights, because obviously they can say whatever they want. The government, including the White House, has never said, here's what you can't say.
And they also have 50 plus additional people people that are hard pass holders at CNN. They actually are one of the individual outlets that has the most hard passes of any news outlet in the country is CNN. They're one of the top 3. And so the idea that they aren't able to get information that they need from the White House is frankly laughable.
Well, let me ask you some process question. How many seats are in that press room?
I believe there's 49 seats.
So 49 total seats. There are thousands of journalists across America. Who gets to decide whose rear ends occupy 49 seats, and how come they get them and thousands of others never, ever get to darken the door of that place?
So we work with the White House Correspondents Association, but they are the primary people that help determine who those seats belong to.
Do they actually get to pick them, or can you say, okay, on this next Thursday, we're going to have journalists from anywhere in the country except Washington?
Well, tradition has been in the past that the White House Correspondents Association determines who sits in that room and who sits in those individual seats.
But that's tradition. It's not law.
True.
And so if there was a desire to give other journalists an opportunity to do it, because, I mean, I think some people see these same folks in there every day and they say, how come they get to do it? And I'm sure there are broadcasters and print reporters all over America who would love to be able to come and ask the president questions and probably wouldn't keep talking if he asked them to stop.
I think that's certainly an option to explore, and maybe we will in this White House. I know the president is one of the most accessible presidents probably ever, but certainly in modern history. He's taken, in the last 6 weeks leading up to the midterms, he took 300 times the number of questions from reporters than either of his predecessors. That's outrageous to pretend that this is a president who doesn't support the press, doesn't support freedom of the press, and hasn't given unprecedented access to those reporters. He's somebody who loves to engage with the press.
Because, we've noticed that. We have.
But, and that's because he loves to be able to speak directly to the American people. We never want to prohibit that from taking place, but at the same time, those individuals can't be disruptive. They can't impede the ability of any individual to do their jobs.
So when might we see the rules or the requirements, the protocol? You've said you sent the letter to CNN tonight. Is that going to be in a few days, a few weeks?
You know, we'll work with our team on that, and certainly moving into Thanksgiving holiday, we'll see how long that process takes. But I think there are some just standard practices. Look, I think the very basic minimum is that if certain reporters like Jim Acosta can't be adults, then CNN needs to send somebody in there who can be.
So if he asked 3 questions when he was only supposed to give 1, does that not make those other reporters a little ticked off that he got more of the candy out of the bowl than they're going to get?
I'm not going to speak for any of the other reporters. I'll leave that to them. But certainly privately, a number of them have expressed their displeasure with the fact of his grandstanding and the position that he often puts a lot of them in. And it's certainly not something that they want to celebrate nor defend.
I don't want to belabor it. Let's move to tomorrow. You're going to California with the president. You'll be looking at some horrific scenes. Worst fires in the history of the country. 63 known dead, 600 unaccounted for. What will the president hope to say to the people of California in that visit tomorrow?
I think the simplest message is that we're here. We're there for you. We will do any and everything we can to provide federal assistance and federal resources. He conveyed that, I know, in a call to Governor Brown earlier this week. He'll be joining us when we get to California tomorrow. I think this will actually probably be one of the harder days that we've had in the 2 years of this administration, not only visiting with the horrific and seeing the scenes of the horrific wildfires that have ravaged California, but also talking with some of the people and the families that were impacted by the shooting there not too long ago. It's going to be, I think, a very difficult day, a very emotional day, and I think the biggest message and the biggest takeaway will be the president saying, we're here, and thankfully the president's got big shoulders, and I think he's going to go there to offer them up to people that need somebody to lean on.
The president had a big moment this week on prison sentencing reform, and we've only got about a minute and a half left. But I want to cover this because I didn't see a lot in the mainstream media. They were so busy
because it was a good story. So usually those don't get a lot of play. Well, it's a great story, and this was bipartisan. You had people that really ranged the full spectrum from the far left to the far right and everyone in between. On a personal level, I was involved in this, one of the committees that helped draft some of the policy based on my own experiences. This was huge. This was major. Give me a synopsis
of what this legislation does that the president pushed this week?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is it brings the country together. It's something that, like you said, it's a bipartisan. It's an area where Republicans, Democrats, everyone can come together and agree that this is a good thing to show a little grace and a little mercy in our justice system, something that hasn't been done in a long time. We've had decades worth of bad decisions that have been improperly placed people in really, I think, longer sentences than they deserved, not allowed people to have a life after prison. And this is something that is very important to the president, very important to Jared Kushner, who's done a tremendous job in helping develop and really work this. This isn't something that happened overnight. It's been a 1.5 year long process, and I think you saw a little bit of the culmination of that, and we're really excited to see it move forward.
He should get the credit for that, and I hope he will. 30 seconds, and that's all we've got. But look, earlier Tammy Bruce on this show said, well, Sarah Sanders is going to be leaving the White House. And
it was an announcement. I didn't know about either.
Is there something you need to tell your dad?
I hope not. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, well, because I was thinking, and I told her, I said,